"Sir, you're under arrest for trespassing on your own property." That's what the cop almost said before I showed him my deed. See, this Karen had been terrorizing our entire lake community for months, calling the police on anyone who dared to exist without her permission. She threatened to sue me for $50,000, filed false police reports, and even tried bribing county officials to get me thrown off my own land. Here's the kicker. She had no idea I owned the $800,000 mansion she was renting. Picture dawn breaking over Lake Serenity. The smell of pine needles mixing with morning mist, when suddenly, blue police lights start strobing across my grandfather's old cabin. Gravel crunches under tires as two squad cars pull up. And there she is, Brenda Carmichael, standing on her mansion's deck in a bright pink bathrobe, pointing at me like I'm some criminal mastermind. What would you do if someone called the cops on you for fishing on your own property? Let me know below. Where are you watching from? I bet half of you have your own WA horror stories. My name's Marcus, and 3 years ago, I thought I'd found paradise. After 20 years in military logistics and a divorce that felt like getting run over by a tank driven by my ex-wife's lawyer, I inherited my grandfather's cabin on Lake Serenity, Minnesota. Population 3,200, where the biggest drama used to be Mrs. Henderson's cat stealing fish from the neighbor's docks. The cabin's nothing fancy, a 1960s A-frame sitting on 2 acres of pure heaven. Every morning I'd wake to loons calling across mirror. Still water. Step onto dockboards worn smooth as glass by 40 years of Minnesota weather and breathe an air so clean it made my lungs forget about 20 years of Army diesel fumes. The place smelled like my childhood old cedar mixed with pine needles and that sweet metallic scent of lake water at dawn. For 2 perfect years, Lake Serenity earned its name. 47 properties scattered around 8 miles of shoreline, mix of blue-collar locals and summer folks, all following one sacred rule. Wave when you see each other, help when someone's in trouble, and mind your own damn business the rest of the time. Then Hurricane Brenda hit. She bought the biggest eyesore on the lake, an $800,000 McMansion that looked like someone had dropped a suburban Dallas house into the Minnesota woods by accident. Within her first week, she'd introduced herself to half the lake by pontoon boat, always wearing those blindingly white capris and cardigans bright enough to signal aircraft. Sweet as artificial sweetener on the surface, but her eyes cold as January lake ice. The morning everything changed. I was sitting on my dock with coffee that tasted like liquid peace when I heard the low rumble of an overpowered pontoon boat cutting through the morning calm like a chainsaw through silk. Yoo-hoo. Hello there, neighbor. Brenda's voice carried across the water with all the warmth of a tax audit. She pulled up too, my dock wearing a smile that would have made a used car salesman proud. I'm Brenda Carmichael from the Executive Estate across the way. Executive Estate? Jesus. I'm here on official WA business, she announced, producing a manila folder with the theatrical flair of a game show host revealing prizes. The Lake Serenity Homeowners Association has voted on updated aesthetic standards, and I'm afraid your rustic setup isn't meeting our community guidelines. I set my coffee mug down so hard it rang against the wooden rail like a bell. What homeowners association? Her plastic smile cracked just enough to show teeth. The one that protects our property values from declining influences. That aluminum boat has got to go. And, frankly, the fishing gear scattered around makes the whole area look like a bait shop exploded. My declining influence was a 1995 L that had caught more fish than her fancy floating living room ever would. The scattered fishing gear was my grandfather's hand-carved rod holders and a tackle box older than she was. Lady, this property has been in my family since before you were born. There's no WA covenant on my deed, and there sure as hell won't be. The mask slipped completely. Her voice dropped to Arctic temperatures. We'll see about that, won't we, soldier? Boy, she gunned that pontoon engine like she was fleeing a crime scene, sending a wake that slammed into my dock hard enough to spill my coffee. The smell of burning gas and expensive perfume lingered in the morning air like a threat, mixing with the clean pine scent until it made my stomach turn. As I watched her mansion's windows glinting in the sunrise like a predator's eyes, that old military instinct kicked in. The one that kept me alive in 3 deployments. This wasn't just some neighbor dispute. This was war, and I had the sinking feeling I'd just been drafted. 3 days later, I found an envelope taped to my front door like a parking ticket from hell. Inside was the most elaborate piece of fiction I'd seen since my ex-wife's divorce settlement demands. Lake Serenity Homeowners Association. Violation notice blazed across expensive letterhead in blood-red letters. Apparently, I owed them $500 for failure to maintain DOS aesthetic standards and had 30 days to comply or face additional fines and potential property liens. The document looked impressive: official seals, case numbers, even legal-sounding language that would make most people panic and write a check. Too bad it was worth less than the paper it was printed on, but most folks wouldn't know that. Time for some reconnaissance. The Cedar Falls courthouse basement smelled like old leather and broken dreams, where dust motes danced in fluorescent light. Like tiny ghosts of bureaucratic nightmares past. I'd learned during my army days that the best intelligence always comes from the people who've been filing papers longer than you've been breathing. So, I made friends with Dolores, the 70s-something county clerk. Another HOA victim, hun. She whispered, pulling out my property file with hands that shook slightly from arthritis. That Carmichael woman's been in here 6 times this month asking about enforcement procedures and lien authority. Between you and me, honey, she doesn't know her ass from her elbow about property law. My deed was crystal clear, no covenants, no restrictions, no HOA authority whatsoever. But here's where my old logistics training kicked in. Always check what the enemy is really doing while they're distracting you with paperwork theater. Brenda's Lake Serenity Homeowners Association existed all right, incorporated 18 months ago with exactly 12 members out of 47 lake properties. In legal terms, they had about as much authority over my property as my neighbor's cat. But while cross-referencing ownership records, something made my detector start screaming. Several lakefront properties had recently transferred to Carmichael Holdings LLC. A quick online search revealed the truth. Our self-appointed HOA queen was running an unlicensed vacation rental empire, turning quiet family cabins into party houses for Twin Cities tourists. The woman lecturing me about community standards was the one actually destroying them. I remembered something my grandfather used to say: before you fight City Hall, make sure you know who actually runs the city. Smart man. He'd also taught me that most county records are public information: property ownership, business licenses, covenant restrictions, all searchable online for free. Amazing what you can learn when you actually do your homework instead of just threatening people. Armed with this intelligence, I decided to test community sentiment with some strategic social media reconnaissance. Facebook might be where brain cells go to die, but it's also where you discover who's really paying attention in your neighborhood. My post was simple: has anyone else received violation notices from the Lake Serenity HOA? Asking for educational purposes. My phone exploded like a fireworks factory. 8 different lake residents sent private messages, each with their own Brenda horror story. She'd been systematically working around the lake like some kind of legal intimidation tornado, threatening elderly widows over bird feeders and young families over mailbox colors. Janet, a retired librarian with organizational skills that would make the CIA weep with envy, had been documenting everything in a 3-ring binder. Tom from the marina shared photos of Brenda's bounce checks and unpaid fuel bills. Even 90-year-old Florence chimed in with observations about unusual late-night activity at Brenda's supposed family rentals. I created a private group chat called Lake Serenity Truth Squad because if you're going to fight crazy, you might as well lean into the comic book drama. That evening, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Brenda's voice oozed through the speaker like honey mixed with industrial solvent. Marcus, sweetie, I saw your adorable little Facebook post. You're making this unnecessarily difficult for yourself. Just asking questions, Brenda. Neighborly curiosity. Oh, honey, you really don't want to go down this road with me. Her voice dropped to that special tone women use when they're about to destroy your credit rating. I have connections you couldn't imagine. And I will absolutely report you to the appropriate authorities for harassment and cyberbullying. The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone and wondering what kind of connections a vacation rental scammer thought she had with local law enforcement. As evening settled over the lake, I sat on my dock, listening to the gentle percussion of waves against weathered wood, breathing in air that still smelled like freedom and fish fry. The sunset painted everything gold, including the truth. Squad members' houses scattered around the shoreline like fortress lights. Brenda had made one critical mistake. She'd picked a fight with someone who actually knew how to gather intelligence before going to war. If Brenda thought Facebook drama would scare me off, she clearly hadn't done her homework on military veterans. We don't retreat. We adapt, improvise, and occasionally overthink everything until 3 a.m. While planning 17 different battle strategies. Tuesday morning brought a surprise visitor. Tom Hendris from County Code Enforcement, looking about as enthusiastic as a man facing a root canal. His pickup truck crunched across my gravel driveway at exactly 9 a.m. because apparently Brenda believed in punctuality when filing bogus complaints. Mr. Marcus, sorry to bother you, but I've got to follow up on some reports about dock violations in an abandoned vehicle. Tom looked embarrassed, which told me everything I needed to know about the quality of Brenda's accusations. I poured him coffee that actually tasted like coffee, instead of the battery acid they serve at government offices, and we walked down to examine my supposedly criminal dock setup. Tom measured everything twice, checked his clipboard, then shook his head like a man who'd wasted his morning on nonsense. Between you and me, he said, lowering his voice even though we were alone. This is the 23rd complaint I've gotten from the same address in 6 months. Ladies got the county office on speed dial. That's when Tom let slip something interesting. Brenda had actually tried to slip him a $100 bill during their last encounter, claiming it was a consulting fee for finding creative interpretations of building codes. The woman wasn't just playing neighborhood dictator, she was testing the waters for small-time corruption. My grandfather always said, you can judge people by how they treat service workers and government employees. Apparently, Brenda's strategy was to either intimidate them or buy them off. That evening, the Truth Squad attended Brenda's emergency HOA meeting as observers, which was about as democratic as a North Korean election. The gathering took place in her mansion's great room, a space so aggressively decorated it looked like a furniture showroom had exploded in shades of beige and gold. Only 6 people showed up, mostly property managers from her rental empire who looked like they'd rather be literally anywhere else. Brenda had prepared an elaborate PowerPoint presentation titled Protecting Our Community Investment, complete with pie charts about property values and photos of non-compliant properties that somehow all belonged to people who'd refused to join her HOA. Janet, bless her librarian heart, took notes like she was documenting war crimes. But the real intelligence came when she noticed Brenda kept checking an expensive Rolex and glancing nervously toward the kitchen during the bathroom break. Because nothing says professional meeting like a bathroom break in someone's living room, Janet followed Brenda and overheard a heated phone conversation. I told you the payments are coming. Brenda hissed into her phone. These people are more stubborn than we expected, but I've got new strategies. Legal pressure, code enforcement, whatever it takes. The pieces started clicking together like a puzzle made of red flags. This wasn't about community standards or property values. Someone was applying financial pressure to Brenda, and she was desperately trying to generate income through harassment and intimidation. I'd seen this pattern before in the army. People under extreme stress make increasingly desperate decisions until they cross lines they never thought they'd cross. The question was, who was holding Brenda's financial leash? My answer came faster than expected. While researching her lawyer, the same guy who'd sent me that threatening cease and desist letter, I discovered he specialized in foreclosure defense and debt collection. Not exactly the kind of attorney you hire for neighborhood disputes, unless you're already drowning in legal problems. So, I did what any reasonable person would do. I filed my own complaint against Brenda for harassment, filing false reports, and using county resources for personal vendettas. 2 could play the bureaucracy game, and I'd had plenty of practice dealing with military red tape. Then I took it one step further. Using the property management company's contact information from the rental listings, I reached out to the actual owner of Brenda's mansion. Turns out Northwood's property management was very interested to hear about their tenants' creative interpretation of lease agreements and unauthorized business activities. Sheriff's Deputy Rodriguez, who'd been tracking the pattern of complaints from our lake, pulled me aside after I filed my counter-complaint. Off the record, he said, leaning against his cruiser while the evening light caught the lake like scattered diamonds. We've been documenting everything. Nothing criminal yet, but she's walking a very thin line, and we're watching. That night, sitting on my dock with the sound of gentle waves mixing with distant laughter from an actual family barbecue across the Lake. I realized Brenda had made a fundamental tactical error. She'd assumed everyone would roll over like scared civilians. Instead, she'd accidentally united a community that had been quietly minding its own business for decades. The smell of charcoal and honest conversation drifted across the water, mixing with the pin-scented evening air that still meant home. Tomorrow would bring new battles, but tonight the good guys were winning. If Brenda thought code enforcement was her nuclear option, she clearly hadn't graduated to actual weapons of mass bureaucratic destruction yet. That honor was reserved for what happened at 6:30 a.m. on a Thursday morning that started peaceful and went sideways faster than a greased pig at a county fair. I was enjoying my morning coffee ritual. That sacred first sip that makes you believe the world might not be completely insane. When the unmistakable crunch of police car tires on gravel shattered the lake's morning calm, blue light strobed across my cabin walls like some twisted aurora borealis, and I could practically feel Brenda's satisfaction radiating from her mansion deck across the water. Two officers climbed out of their cruiser, looking about as thrilled as mall security guards called to break up a senior citizen flash mob. The younger cop had that fresh-faced earnestness of someone who still believed every 911 call was a genuine emergency. His partner, a grizzled veteran with sergeant stripes and the weary expression of a man who'd seen every flavor of human stupidity, clearly knew this was going to be another waste of taxpayer money. Mr. Marcus, we've received reports that you're trespassing on private property and made threatening statements toward a female resident. I invited them in for coffee because honestly, if you're going to be falsely accused at dawn, you might as well be civilized about it. The senior officer, Sergeant Peterson, according to his name tag, accepted gratefully. Probably because he knew government coffee tastes like liquid regret mixed with budget cuts. Sir, we have to respond to all calls, Peterson said, settling into my grandfather's old kitchen chair that creaked like a ship in a storm. But between you and me, this complaint doesn't pass the smell test. That's when I produced my secret weapon. Documentation, security camera footage, property deeds, the complete timeline of Brenda's harassment campaign, and even Tom, the code enforcement officer's written statement about attempted bribery. I'd learned in the army that paperwork wins wars, and this particular battle was about to get very one-sided. Peterson reviewed the footage of my supposed threatening behavior, which showed me helping elderly Florence load her fishing gear into her car while Brenda lurked behind her mansion's windows like some suburban spy novel villain. The trespassing occurred on a public access road that had been public since before Brenda was born, despite the shiny new private property signs she'd posted overnight, like some kind of legal fairy. Ma'am, Peterson muttered, shaking his head at the footage. Either you're the world's most polite terrorist or somebody's been yanking our chain. While the officers were reviewing my evidence, my phone rang. Dave Morrison, a private investigator who moonlighted at the local tackle shop and looked like he could arm wrestle a bear, had finished the background check I'd commissioned. What he'd discovered would have made a soap opera writer weep with envy. Brenda Carmichael owed $47,000 in unpaid HOA fees from her previous community in Minneapolis. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a butter knife and serve it at the county fair. She'd been sued by that HOA and lost, which explained her intimate knowledge of legal intimidation tactics. More concerning, she owed money to everyone from contractors to credit card companies with a pattern of using legal threats to delay payments. Until creditors gave up or settled for pennies. But here's where it got really interesting. Dave had discovered that Brenda's rental operation violated 3 different zoning ordinances, none of which required business licenses she'd never bothered to obtain. The county had no record of her vacation rental business, which meant she'd been operating illegally while lecturing everyone else about community standards. The Truth Squad had grown to 15 Lake residents, each with their own Brenda horror story. Tom at the marina revealed she owed $3,200 in dock fees and had threatened to sue him for discrimination when he demanded payment. The hardware store owner shared security footage of Brenda ordering supplies, then disputing the charges with her credit card company, claiming defective materials she'd never returned. The pattern was clear as lake water on a